Well, a new surprising development on the case of the Chief Justice of Nigeria, Justice Walter Onnoghen. President Buhari has sworn in Justice Ibrahim Tanko Mohammed as acting CJN and suspended Walter Onnoghen. This is the suspension, well, they say the suspension is legal, especially as the case is still ongoing. Now, joining us to talk about this, ladies and gentlemen, we have Kayode Ladeinde. He's a political editor. It's good to have you.
Good evening.
I hope I got your name right now.
Correctly.
And we have someone we can call a friend of the house, Nejeeb Bello. He's a public affairs analyst. Nejeeb, it's good to have you here.
Yeah, good evening.
Wow. So good to have you, gentlemen. And well, this just broke. We just got this news. It's breaking. Now, how would you react to this development, given all that has happened leading up to today? Let's start with you, Nejeeb.
There's no justification for this. In fact, it's the most shocking thing I've heard in decades. The president suspending a chief justice and swearing in another. I don't see how it can happen.
But they say it's legal.
It's not legal. It's not legal. Just before we came on set, I've spoken to a few lawyers. It's not there. There's no provision for it in our constitution. I don't know of any such provision. Maybe they just invented it, but I don't know of any such provision.
I see Ladeinde nodding to it. Are you in agreement?
I don't know. For me, maybe because I'm not a lawyer, I'm just trying to decipher what could be that kind of audacity from the executive arm of government to suspend the head of another arm of government. That looks to me as very, very audacious on the part of the federal government, that irrespective of how, permit me to use that word, desperate in getting this guy out of the hook. But I think that was quite audacious, because listening to some legal giants who have made some positions on these, I'm referring to Femi Falana, who said that he disagreed with the federal government that they should even withdraw the charges because the two processes that should have been followed were not followed. The fact that it takes the NJC to recommend him for suspension before he can be suspended, that's coincidentally, he is the head of NJC. And even when they make that suspension, it will take the two-thirds of the National Assembly, or specifically the upper chamber, the Senate, to ratify that before this suspension can take place. But if the federal government, because I look at that statement, the federal government is citing the CCT, that's the Code of Conduct Tribunal, as saying that it needs to be suspended for this issue to go on. But don't also forget that we have the Court of Appeal who had come in to say that CCT do not have jurisdiction to go ahead without trial. So I think for federal government to go ahead, because nobody saw this coming, we know they are desperate, we know there is a hand of Esau that is pushing for him to go out of the thing, but for them to now come out openly, don't forget the town hall meeting where the vice president said the president wasn't aware. So I think it's clear now that the president was aware, the president wants this guy out, and there is no other way to micromanage the truth.
I'm just curious because whenever it has to do with the CJN, the NJC has to be in the know. Now, they have put a guy there who's acting. Who recommended the guy? Because those recommendations have to come from the NJC. What are we seeing a skipping of all of the due processes in a government that is saying, look, we're here to fight every form of corruption? Could this also be a form of corruption of sorts?
Now, you mean the person that recommended the CJN?
Yeah, because it's the NJC who's supposed to recommend at least 4 recommendations, and then the federal government, the executive is supposed to pick out of those 4 and then send that person to the National Assembly for ratification. So if all of these processes have been skipped, can we really say that we're truly fighting corruption and we're straightforward, or we're on the straight and narrow? Does this not question everything?
What we are seeing right now is pure dictatorship. It's tyranny. Nothing is being done according to our constitution anymore. There is, like he said, there's desperation and people are trying to, people in the executive, I think we should stop saying the federal government, because the Senate is part of the federal, the National Assembly is part of the federal government.
And the judiciary.
The judiciary, it's the presidency that is doing all of this, and it's chaos.
But
and
then,
I'm sure Nigerians are going to react to this.
The president did say that the reason why he's letting the arm of government, or the CCT rather, to have what it say in this matter was because the CJN cannot be a judge in his own case. Are you sure that does not justify the suspension?
The CJN is not a judge in the case.
No, for him to still remain as the head of the NJC and remain as the Chief Justice of Nigeria, if a trial continues, he can be a judge in his own case.
Anybody can be suspected of anything or accused of anything. But when it comes to being guilty, it's a different thing altogether. This same president has talked on other people that have been accused, and it's called Ganduje responsible. He has told other people that, oh, we need to verify this information. We need the courts to go through the entire process. So why is this different in another case?
And if I can add to that,
before you add to that, I will just have to take a quick break. Nigeria Decides continues in just a moment.
Stay with us. Thank you for staying with us. We are still in our election studios. This is Nigeria Decides, and we still have in the studio with us Kayode Ladeinde. Here, he's a political editor, and we also have Nejeeb Bello, public affairs analyst. We're still looking at the breaking story. Apparently, President Buhari has sworn in Justice Ibrahim Tanko Mohammed as acting CJN just right after he suspended Justice Walter Onnoghen from the position of the Chief Justice of Nigeria. Now, before we went on that break, gentlemen, you were telling us how this is not necessarily in tandem with the law, but it was expressly in that made known in that press release that it was legal. In fact, it was put there in caps lock, legal. So it makes us really wonder. Now, you called it tyranny, and you are questioning the whole idea. You're asking what could have given them the temerity to go on with that, move.
You're just taking us back to the basics of what we studied in government those days, and where they told us that there are three arms of government. There is what we call the separation of power, and we understand that they should also serve as watchdog of one another.
Checks and balances.
Checks and balances. But this is, that's why I said I'm so curious. I really want lawyers to tell us what new thing, because NBA has made their position known. The body of benchers have made their position known. And even those lawyers you think have sympathy for the federal government, or let me use your word now, for the presidency, have also made their position known that there are laid down procedures. Some who even try to be on the other side have said that the president, it's okay to probe the CJN, but what they're saying is let it be done according to the law. So like I said, I'm so curious about that audacity the presidency has taken to go ahead to suspend and appoint the head of another arm of government.
I like the fact that you're still being curious, but what do you think, in your opinion, if you were to take a wild guess?
Desperation. This is desperation. And you are giving us rooms to speculate now. You're giving us room to now say that the president is afraid of that election. Because people have said that, oh, the president is looking at the tribunal, is looking at so many cases that will go to the appeal court and later to the Supreme Court. And some have said that it has been proven that this CJN is very, very independent. Don't forget how he wrote his minority report, even in favor of this president when he lost the presidential election. So you have given us room to now say that, like I said, the presidency denied that they were not aware of what was happening. But from this action, Please, the appeal court has already told the CCT that you don't have jurisdiction. So why don't you allow this case to be argued in court and let them say that the CCT can go ahead with what they've done? These cases are still being argued in court, and you go ahead to implement. And he just reminded us, why didn't he implement the allegation against this, the governor of Kano State? Why is there selective implementation in all these cases? So there is enough room for us to suspect that the president is desperate.
Thank you so much, Kayode, for that explosive one. But then I'll have to come to you, Nejeeb. When you mentioned that this move is taking us back to dictatorship, I remembered the former president Obasanjo's letter to the president, and I wonder if that holds water now, given what we are seeing. But then, what do you think could be the implication of this move, the fallout of this move by the president?
I think it's time for Nigerians to take more serious action against this president. Not only is this bordering on dictatorship, the same thing people talk about, tribalism, sectionalism, appointing someone who, like he has said, he said it just yesterday that he believes that he doesn't appoint people based on their tribes or anything. He appoints based on qualification, and he's trying to tell us now that this man from Bauchi State, this Tanko Mohammed, is more qualified. No,
but then we know that Tanko Mohammed is the most senior justice of the Supreme Court as at today.
What is he doing there? What is he doing there? There's no law that allows him to be there.
But his principle has been suspended, so...
There's no law allowing the president to suspend the CJN. It's like Saraki coming out without any form of impeachment or anything, and Saraki just announcing that he has suspended the president.
So you're questioning the character of this new guy. You're saying that if he really knows the law, he should have said, I decline.
Exactly. and we have people
has that ever
like...
happened? No. Has that ever happened in the history of this country where even in the face of...
Oh, yes. Buhari has appointed some people to some positions where they've turned him down and said no. And
where
they
were
made
these
public
people?
statements.
They were not in Nigeria, serving in Nigeria. I remember those people who were appointed
there was
were
a
serving
woman who
outside
was
this
no
country.
there was a woman who was appointed to the board of a university or so, and she said she couldn't handle it, and she wasn't even pre-informed before that appointment came, and she turned it down. Away from this, let's remember that we have Vice President Osibanjo, who is a son, and we have Malami, and even Isi Sage is there, and they are not advising the president on the right steps to take. It's very scary.
Well, let's just make, and this is not anything cast in stone, let's just make the excuse that because their appointments are political, let's just say that they might be politically biased. But for those who are on the other side, especially for the man who has been given the opportunity to step into Onnoghen's shoes, should he not be saying, Your Excellency, this is not right, I decline, and put out a press release? This is what we see in other clients, but I don't know if this can ever happen.
Like I said, this is a script. We thought it was speculation, but this is real Nollywood. This is real acting, and it's been scripted, but what we don't know is whether the movie will be finished. Because like I said, we have, as a journalist, we have refrained ourselves from speculating. We have refrained ourselves from doing this kind of conjectures. But it is clear. I've been avoiding the word dictatorship, but this is what it's looking like. The head of other arm of government has also been tried. What was the outcome? It was free. Am I right? Mm-hmm. Now, if we have used the word he was suspected to be a thief and he has been removed as the president of the Senate, he may never have come back. As we speak, he would have been removed unjustly. The same thing is happening to the third arm of government, and you're not asking the question. Good, they don't have immunity. Talking about the CJN, talking about the head of the National Assembly, but there are due process how they can be removed. And that's why Saraki stuck. Don't forget that Saraki was also asked to step aside. Now, is it not justified? Because at the end of the day, all the cases, he won. This MCCT. So what is the haste? What is the hurry? Why should he not be there during the election? I don't know whether you're seeing what I'm saying. I know you don't want to talk about it, but the whole thing is so clear. These guys should not be there during the election. These guys should not be there during the tribunal. These guys should not be there because it's going to determine those judges that will handle those things,
now,
those justices.
Kayode, let me put this to you. How do you think the NBA, the Nigerian
They
Bar
made a
Association,
statement.
will react to this?
It's going to be more explosive because just the fact that he was alleged to have been corrupt, they reacted. Now that he has been suspended and replaced, trust me, your journalists will have a lot of work to do
guys, we need to quickly take a break, but don't forget you can be part of the conversation. Share your thoughts with us on our social media pages on Nigeria Decides. You can tweet at Nigeria Nigeria Decides, hashtag Nigeria Decides, plus TV Africa. That's on right. Twitter, Facebook, and we are live on our YouTube pages. We want to thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you so much, Kayode Ladeinde, political editor, for joining us on the program today. I also want to thank you, Nejeeb Bello, public affairs analyst, for joining us. When we come back, we'll get to talk about the role of the media in all of this. You'll find out just what the media does and how it does it after this break.